Let's explore a very specific and maybe kind of familiar feeling. It's all about a generation that was caught between two completely different worlds and how that left a psychological imprint you can still feel in conversations today.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Have you ever felt it? That subtle difference when you're talking to someone who came of age in the 1990s. They listen without rushing to respond. They don't seem to panic in the silence. There's just this certain steadiness. And if you've ever wondered what that is, well, you are definitely not alone.
Now that word right there, calibrated, that is absolutely key. It's not about being distant or dramatic or anything like that. It's this sense of regulation. It's a nervous system that learned how to just be with itself before it ever learned how to broadcast itself to the entire world. And look, it's so easy to mistake this for a personality trait. Maybe they're just an introvert or super laid back. But what our source material suggests is something much deeper. This isn't really about temperament. It's about the unique timing of their upbringing, happening right during a transition the human nervous system had literally never experienced before.
So this brings us to the core concept here, this idea of the bridge generation. They basically occupy a psychological space that no generation before or after them can ever fully understand.
And this just illustrates it perfectly. They had to navigate these two completely different worlds. Their early years were shaped by the analog world on the left, slower, more intentional, and for the most part, totally unobserved. And then, it felt like almost overnight they were plunged into the digital world on the right, fast, constantly connected, where being visible became a kind of currency.
But here's the thing about a bridge. It doesn't really belong to either side, does it? It exists to connect what came before with what came after. And psychologically, this generation was shaped to carry both of those realities, becoming fluent in the rhythms of two completely different worlds.
Imagine being bilingual, but not in language, in reality itself. They learned to constantly switch codes between analog and digital. So on one hand, yeah, they value convenience and progress. But on the other, they remember a kind of depth that technology really struggles to replicate. And this constant back and forth creates this unique underlying tension.
So, how was this foundation actually built? To really get this generation, we have to go back and look at the world they came from first, that analog world of their childhood. Think about it. Childhood for them just unfolded without a record button. Moments weren't meant to be captured, saved, and then shared with hundreds of people. They were just lived. Embarrassing moments, they faded away instead of being immortalized online. Joy existed fully, right there in the moment. Because of all this, presence wasn't some special skill you had to practice. It was just the default requirement for living.
And a huge part of that life was boredom. I mean, in a world without an endless stream of content in your pocket, you couldn't just escape boredom instantly. It was something you had to sit with. And in that quiet space, something really important happened. Boredom became a doorway. It forced you to invent games, to daydream, to actually occupy your own mind. And it did more than just spark creativity. It trained emotional self-regulation. It taught your nervous system that discomfort, while it rises, it peaks, and then it fades all on its own, without you needing an immediate distraction. It proved that your own inner life was rich enough to hold your attention.
This whole process extended to desire too. Wanting something, say a new CD, didn't lead to getting it 2 hours later. There was a built-in delay. You had to wait, you had to save your money, you had to anticipate. And that process of waiting, it actually deepened the desire, which made the final reward feel so much more meaningful. So here's the crucial point. Waiting didn't feel like an absence or some kind of failure. It was just part of the process. This taught a kind of emotional patience, a deep trust that things you want can exist without being satisfied that very second. And wow, that is a huge contrast to a world where any delay can feel like a loss.
Okay, so that's the foundation, but now let's look at the second half of the story. After building this analog foundation, this generation had to go through a massive adaptation as the world fundamentally changed right under their feet.
And man, what a shift it was. They can remember a time when privacy was the default, when being unreachable was just normal. Then, almost suddenly, constant connection arrived. Being available was expected, and silence started to feel kinda suspicious. And now today, visibility itself has become a form of currency.
This whole experience forced them to become what we can call communication bilinguals. They're fluent in the quiet depth of offline interaction, where you can just sit with someone in comfortable silence, but they're also masters of the speed and the unspoken rules of digital communication. The key is they're not behind, they're actually fluent in both.
And we always praise adaptability as this key strength, right? And it is. But there's a flip side. The source for this explainer makes it really clear that this constant adjustment came with a hidden psychological cost. one that's rarely, if ever, talked about.
So what are those costs? Well, there's a quiet sense of displacement, of not fully belonging to the old world or the new one. There's a deep fatigue that comes from constantly recalibrating how you exist. And there's this tendency to just absorb discomfort quietly, hiding the strain behind a mask of resilience. So what does all of this, the analog foundation, the great adaptation, and those hidden costs, what does it all leave behind? It creates a lasting psychological imprint that, yeah, we can still see today.
You know, a lot of people from this generation say they feel older than they actually are. And this right here gets to the heart of why. It's not because they grew up too fast. It's because they witnessed something most generations don't. They watched an entire world with its own rules and its own rhythms just disappear while they were still learning how to belong to it.
And that experience, it leaves behind what the source calls emotional gravity. It's not exactly sadness, it's more like a weight, a sense that something meaningful was lost, even as something really useful was gained. It creates a maturity and an awareness of just how fragile things can be.
And this right here, this really illustrates the main takeaway. What might look from the outside like distance or slowness is often something else entirely. It's balance, it's steadiness. It's a nervous system that learned regulation before it was ever exposed to constant stimulation.
So if any of this is resonating with you, the message is one of recognition. You are not behind. You are not out of place. You simply carry a rhythm that was formed in a different environment, and that rhythm still serves you, even if it doesn't always match the frantic pace of the world around you.
And that leads to a final question for all of us, really, no matter when we grew up. In a world that prizes speed and constant connection, it's worth asking yourself, what is the rhythm that you carry inside?